Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about rest times between sets, because it's something that comes up a lot. A lot of people ask, and some people will even ask me, Jason, how long do you take between sets? I'm like, unless it's speed work, I don't time it personally, but that doesn't mean I don't give my lifters rest times. And I want people to keep that in mind. A lot of my lifters do not have a limited time. I have a pretty much every workout day, I assign myself a 4 to 5 hour window to where the only things I have to do is get my training done. Okay, on my 4 training days a week. So it's not a big deal for me personally. And I mean, I might finish my workout quick. I might stretch it out and even take naps in between and finish it. So the reality of it is it's not really a big deal for me, and I don't really particularly worry about the rest times, right? Because it doesn't matter for me. And people who say, well, that's why you're not in shape. Well, by objective athletic standards, I am. But I don't use my lifting to do it. Okay? I do GPP work, which is high intensity strength-based conditioning, and I do cardio. That's how I get my conditioning up, right? I don't worry about it from the weight room. Now, certain types of training might require conditioning, and some of the stuff I do in certain phases do require conditioning, but we don't use our training to build that. We don't use our lifting to build that. We lift weights for the purposes of gaining muscle or gaining strength, or both, right? That's it. That's why we lift weights. Objectively speaking, of course, because those are the physical changes that we get from it. That's the training response. So let's talk about hypertrophy, because this is the one that throws people off. People will say, well, yeah, obviously really long breaks for max strength, but for hypertrophy, you want short breaks. The research doesn't confirm that. And I'm talking researchers who care about bodybuilding. There are researchers in exercise science who get grants for this stuff, who study this stuff, who identify as bodybuilders, who put out information for bodybuilders. And these are researchers themselves who bodybuild. They want to know what's the best way to get stronger. You know what? Longer rest periods produce more muscle growth repeatedly in the lab. Novice lifters, intermediate lifters, advanced lifters, and all of them. How much do we need? Well, you need the minimum amount that you can replicate your previous sets. Okay? That's what we're shooting for. Now, you might be in such bad shape that you can't repeat a third set no matter what you do. So here's what we're talking about. The studies that have looked at it, that have found that if your rest times are so short that you cannot replicate the same reps with the same weight on subsequent sets, your rest times are too short. Now, people say, well, what if you're doing X number of sets and it's a bunch of sets? Well, you might need 20-minute breaks. Maybe you need to rethink why you need 8 sets of that exercise. Unless you're doing speed work, you might want to rethink why are you doing that? Because you literally, when you get to a certain threshold, it literally might take you a 15 or 20-minute break to get that 8 or 10 rep set again. Right? And if you can't get there, then it's junk volume. So that's the conundrum we run into. People say, well, you could do that by just using lighter weight and not going very close to failure with the first set. Well, that just equals junk volume. Okay? Because only the last 5 reps where you get within failure, and this is the effective rep theory, and it's argued against. I can make a certain case against certain elements of it. I've seen experts make a good case against it, but a lot of the best experts do realize that. The effective reps are what stimulates hypertrophy. And anything outside of the effective rep zone is going to stimulate very small amounts of growth, if any. I'm not saying you won't get any, but not going to be ideal. Not going to be ideal, or even close to. So, in other words, if you're taking your 15 rep max and doing sets of 10, sure, you can cut the breaks down. But are you going to get much bigger from it? If you're on anabolics, you will. But what if you're natural? What if you use very, very small amounts of stuff? You're probably not going to get much muscle from those sets. And this is what the research shows, right? So that's not a solution. Or people say, well, I could just drop weight. Well, we run into the same thing. You're falling outside the effective rep zone for the sake of reducing rest times. You're dropping down to, let's say you do your 10 rep max or close to your 11 rep max for 10. And then just so that you can do a 60 or 90-second set, you take 5% of the weight off the bar. And then you do another set of 10. Okay? You probably only got 1 or 2 effective reps. It doesn't matter how hard it felt. From a muscle fiber recruitment perspective, you're running on endurance fibers again. You're not tapping into the upper threshold fibers. And you do a third set and you drop it another 10%. Okay, and you squeeze out 10 reps. You might not have gotten any effective volume. And then you do another set the same way. Those final sets, you're not getting anything from. The only ones that you probably gained muscle from were the first set or two. And someone will say, well, I trained that way and gained muscle. Well, yeah, because you had a really, really hard set with some volume in there. That one set probably gave you muscle. Single sets produce muscle growth in the lab. It's not maximal, but it's something like up to 40 or 50% of what you could gain from a workout can be done by doing a single set all out to failure. But most people are not training hard or for multiple sets or doing these short rest times because they want 50% of their gains. They want at least 80%. Now, in theory, they want 100%, but most people aren't going to train that hard. Realistically, most of you aren't. You're just not. They settle for 80%. They settle for 90%. Well, you're not going to get there with the method that I just described. It's not going to happen. Because you really only had 1 to 1.5 sets that produced any hypertrophy. The rest were just junk volume. They didn't do anything except make you tired. So you have to space the sets out. You have to be able to replicate your previous sets. Because if you can't, we're falling outside of your effective rep zone. They're just turning into junk volume. You're doing it for the sake to cut rest times. And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't even matter if they go to failure. Okay, because you're back to running on endurance fibers to go to failure. Because the upper threshold fibers haven't recovered enough to refire. The ones that can get the most muscle growth are not functioning during those sets. So you need the longer rest times, and it might be 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It could be up to 5 minutes. So people say, well, what do I do then? How do I get out of the gym quickly? By finding the number of minutes you need to replicate and kind of working with that. And it's probably about 2 to 3 minutes for most people, depending on how hard we're going. I take it to 3 for a lot of my guys who have tight schedules, and they have to be out of the gym in an hour or an hour and a half. We can get pretty tight on those things, but at a certain point you have to go, maybe you're just doing too much total training. In other words, if you only have an hour to work with, you probably need to limit the total number of sets you're doing, not cut the breaks down. Because are you just trying to get in and do a bunch of stuff, or are you trying to actually get in and produce a hypertrophic response? That's the difference. Now, people say, well, what about longer breaks? Well, longer breaks don't seem to hurt you. In other words, you can take 10 minutes between sets, and it's not going to hurt your gains. But you're going to be there a lot longer. If you could have replicated that same performance with 3-minute breaks, but you're taking 10-minute breaks, you're spending 3 times the number of hours per week that you needed to in the gym. And if you're fine with that, there's actually no negatives to it. But if time is an issue for you, then that's a problem too. So there's no negative on the training side, but on the time management side, it's bad. And if you have that extra 3 hours a week to just chill at the gym or in your weight room or whatever, that's fine. But if you don't, that's going to be a problem. And then people will say, well, what about the conditioning? And if you want more conditioning, do conditioning work. You know, all these same people who will say something silly like that will make fun of CrossFit. Why? Well, because, they're trying to do 37 things all from once. Well, aren't you doing the same thing? Why are you trying to get your cardio up at the expense of your strength and your muscle mass? Because that's what you're doing. If you're trying to take these really short breaks, you are literally sacrificing muscle for the sake of conditioning. Maybe you should do your hypertrophy and strength training as hypertrophy and strength training. And then when you want to get your conditioning up, you can go drag a sled or push a prowler or do weighted carries or some barbell complexes. If you want to get your endurance up, go ride a bike. Right? See how easy that is? All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.